Welcome, students. Recording in progress. Welcome, students. I just want to introduce you to your next lab, which will be a lab on managing risk and calculating risk, as we would do in the service desk. So you have two spreadsheets that work with that. And so I'm opening one of the spreadsheets here, which is the risk assessment. The idea here is that you look at various aspects of your business that's impacted by the service desk and how the risk attaches to that part of your business. What is the risk attached to that part of the business? Now, there's a couple of things that we look at in that. We're going to look at the risk itself. As you see here, we have a description of the risk and how critical is the risk. Then we look at the impact of the risk. Two things that we will try and measure as the target for this is really the service desk management. So imagine yourself in that role. You're going to grow into that role sometime, possibly, potentially. And so then you have to look at the risk, look at how much money you're going to use to reduce that risk or to avoid that risk. So there's two things that we look at here, which is how critical is the risk? How bad is it, for example, if we have a situation where somebody has their computer and they finish using it, and then that computer is transferred to another person, and then there's some data on that computer, which perhaps was private, and that other person has access to that, and that's a data leakage. So that could be quite a bad thing. So that's one aspect of it. So what do we do to reduce that risk? Well, what we could do is maybe a situation we would say is, all right, before we will recycle any laptop computers, we will wipe the hard drives. So that would be a way of reducing that risk. Now, we can't do that without some sort of opportunity for the prior owner. So maybe we're going to hold that laptop for 4 weeks, just in our service desk, and then after the 4 weeks, we will wipe the hard drive, and that could reduce the risk. Now, so that's one part of the risk would be looking at how likely is it. We can reduce the likelihood by putting in some processes which would do that. The other thing that we look at, though, is not just the likelihood, but not just the actual risk itself, but reduce the likelihood of that risk or understand the likelihood of the risk. So what we might say is, well, how likely is it that there's a data risk? Maybe that's quite likely, or maybe it's not. Let me give you a better example of that, which is outside the IT area. So supposing that you buy a new car and you're concerned that the car might be stolen. There is a risk reduction that you can do for that, which is you can install into your car a security system which will immobilize the car, which will make all kinds of warnings. But this is going to cost you like 5,000 reals or $5,000. Let's say if you were living in a large city in many countries, so I'd include like the United States in that, that would be a worthy investment. You'd want to do that, and perhaps some other things too, because if you looked at the statistics, you'd find that there's a high likelihood of a car being stolen if it's left on the street. So you might have some other things there. Now, if you're here in Qatar, that's probably a little less likely, and you might look at that and say, okay, the impact of having my car stolen, that's the same here as it is in the United States, right? You lost your car, it's a bad thing. But the actual likelihood is a lot less. And so therefore, I might not spend the $5,000 to put in the special anti-theft measures that I might put if I was living in Manhattan, for example. Does that make sense? So you look at both things, how likely is it? In that situation, what you're doing is you would be saying, well, I'm going to self-insure, which means that I won't pay any extra on this. I'll wear it on the chin if it goes bad, but I think that that's so unlikely that I'm willing to accept that risk. Does that make sense? So that could happen. Now, so I've talked about impact. So you can see in this spreadsheet, got a couple of spreadsheets here, impact and likelihood. So if you have a situation where the impact is high, but the likelihood is low, then the rating of that we're going to attach to that risk is kind of medium or low. If I change the impact to be a low impact, we say, well, this is a, then we see that the rating is low. But if I say, well, that's a high impact, and it's also quite likely, then what you're going to find is that we start getting into a critical rating. The whole idea of this exercise that you're going to get is you're going to get these two spreadsheets. The whole idea is for you to understand that as an IT service manager, you manage with not just sort of things that are off the top of your head. You like to have numbers. Now, I don't know if you like to have numbers, but generally saying there's an old sort of adage that goes with management. You can't manage what you can't measure. We need to measure. I mean, we talked about key performance indicators and things like that. Typically, we like to measure things. So these spreadsheets are just a way of measuring your risk. Once we measure it, we can look at what we would do to reduce that risk and how much money we would put in that way, etc. So that's enough on that spreadsheet. The other spreadsheet that I think I've got, no, maybe it's still in, okay, I downloaded it, right? So it should be in downloads. So that would be the BIA template. So we've got this other spreadsheet coming. Where are you? There we are. And so this is the other one that you're going to work at. This is, so these two spreadsheets, the first one that I just showed you there, I just want you to go in there and play around with those things and see how the risk changes, all right? You don't really need to submit much with that. You can just change a few things and then sort of submit that as what you're doing. With this one, what you should do is you should add some processes here and actually think about, now you don't have to add many, maybe like 2 or 3. So like one process is given there an email service, that would be a process. A process might be the cafeteria food. Now with cafeteria food, that is not something that happens in the IT desk, so that you would have to change the department here to be, I don't know, maybe that's facilities, right? Instead of whatever. I don't know what they mean by BO, but you could say, I don't know, whatever that is. I'm just going to go to B3. So cafeteria food. So when it says reputation, what we mean there is how important is it that the cafeteria, if you're the cafeteria, to your business, that your reputation is good in the outside world. Maybe that's quite important. I don't know. I mean, I think the cafeteria management here, they do operate outside of the university, and so if it was known that they were providing a poor service here, that it might impact them in the other business that they do in Qatar. So that might not be a non, it might be, well, at least a medium, right? And so what we see is we've got a number of things that we can work with here. We can look at how that affects it. I want you to have a look at all of those. And then you'll see that as you change things here, that it actually is going to change the numbers here for the impact value. So if we increase the reputation effect from none, that should, so we've got an 8 there for impact value. If we change that to medium, didn't change, did it? What happened there? Okay, now why didn't it change? Because we've got something there which is a none, right? The economics. What has to happen, I think, is okay. Let's change this one from none to medium. Yeah, so because we had a none in the economic value, then these things kind of multiply and add together. In order to get a number which is bigger, you have to have none of these things, not including nones. All right, so what you'll see is as you increase these values here, the value of the impact will increase. Or as we decrease these, the value of the impact will decrease. And so that's the idea there. Just come up with 2 or 3 things that could happen. We mentioned the cafeteria food. I suppose other things would be, you know, D2L access. That's a service that's provided by the service desk. And so let's put that down as IT service, IT, and I'm not sure what they mean by GRC, but I'll put SD for service desk. Now, how important is that to our reputation? Well, maybe not too much if we looked at reputation being our global reputation outside the college. Oh, no, come to think of it, no, D2L, that would be kind of important. If all the students were grumbling about D2L, then maybe that would be a reputational problem because we use that as our sort of key delivery. So I'm going to put that as a medium as well. But what we're saying here is it has no economic benefit. As I say, I think that we might end up losing some students, maybe not. I think maybe still low, but not none. And so we see these numbers sort of changing as those things change. That's what I want you to do. Just pick 3 ideas. I gave you 2. You can come up with another one. They can be things that have to do with IT, and they can be things that have to do with other things. We'll make some changes there. Now, the other thing where you need to make some changes is in these things here, which you have already seen in the lectures from last week. RTO, these are all measured in days or hours or minutes or whatever, all 3 of these. So our RTO, right? So that's going to be our what? Remember, anybody remember that? So that's going to be the time. It's going to be a critical time to which we have to, if we go past that time, we're having a critical effect on our business. That's what all of these are basically. So go back and have a look at those in your lecture notes and see and come up with a number. What is the number where we get to the point where if we don't have this service, it's critical to our business? That's the type of thing that you want to look at there, and then maybe have some comments. We'll look at this again next lesson. I just wanted to get you started on it so you can start looking at that from tonight. But we've got the rest of the week. I do have some good news for you on that. The good news is that we are finished, as far as I know, our theory presentation. And so the stuff that will be included in the final exam, etc., we're kind of up to date on that. So this is our thing. We're going to have our quiz in a few minutes now. And then next lesson, we'll look at this again. Sound good? All right, so I'm going to stop this. How much time?